Well, welcome to a breath of fresh footy. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, hello, whatever time you watch this podcast, we will be here with you because the internet is 24 hours, the way it should be, so that we can talk about the world game at all times of the day. I'm Matthew, and I'm really, really keen to talk to my really good friend Phil. But before we get into this interview, some Arsenal news coming through. It looks like Lucas Torreira will be going on a loan deal, and I think that he's going to be heading off to Torino on this loan deal. And if it goes through, they will have to pay for him at the end of it, and it'll be worth £21.5 million, which would go a long way to securing the midfield after target Hossim Orr, who is playing with Leon and just went out with the red card. So I wonder what's going on there. But that is definitely some breaking news. And with Emmy's fee of nearly £20 million, we're starting to get somewhere. And I think midfield transfers will definitely be coming through to Arsenal, which will be great. It would be great if we started to act a bit more like a big club that we should be. But having said that, I'm really, really excited to have my good friend Phil. And Phil, thank you for being on the show. And of course, you are the brains behind this podcast. And I love the name Breath of Fresh Footy. Well done. And how are you going, by the way?
Oh, good, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on. I just, since you've told us all about what Arsenal's doing, I thought I might kick off by talking to you about how my bins are filling up out the side of the house, because that's how I feel about what you've just said. But, no, I mean, one of our fans has already criticised us, which I think is a victory. That the name Breath of Fresh Footy, that's okay, because we're win players, right? In case the viewing several don't understand, we're musicians. And that's a sad state of affairs. But it's because you've got the gunner's gun there, but you can't expect us. We don't care about being right or something or fair here on this show. I mean, really, do we? I don't know.
I don't think so. Look at me. Look at what I'm wearing at the moment. But I would expect nothing less from the colleague of mine who said that his birthday is the same day as mine, and we went through the same year level at the same school. And what goes to show is Man United fans can't hack a bloody cannon. So there you go. But, I was really interested because I'm really sorry that we didn't actually load up our watch along, because you watched a game with me on the weekend. I had a few issues with the mic. So you watched that game, which was the Arsenal versus Fulham game, and then you decided to watch the Liverpool and Leeds game. And I remember you told me some really, really interesting comments when you were comparing the two games. And I'd love you to share with our viewers, in particular, because you're a footballer yourself, and I've heard a pretty decent one. What have you noticed about the state of affair with the modern game compared to something maybe of 10 to 15 years ago or yesteryear?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, but basically, the Leeds Fulham match is the way the modern game sometimes looks. It looks like a whole bunch of robots running around trying to do what their managers told them, and that's good. It's good to be a professional. It's what you're supposed to do. Don't forget they've got scouts all around the world, so why should they pick you? You've got to do what you're told, and the belief is that you win that way, or at least you can be controlled enough to stay in the Premier League that way. Nothing wrong with that. That worked well for Man United for a long time. Controversial comment, but I feel they played a bit of corporate football back in the early thousands and so on. Still good football, don't get me wrong, boy. But these days, yeah, so it's not looking like that. Then Leeds Liverpool comes along, and Leeds, they sort of, yeah, Bielsa's approach was to just go for it, to play with courage, as we were frequently told by the commentator. And I looked into a little bit more about this afterwards. And one of the things he does is he switches players into different positions. Well, at least they don't stay in the same position for the whole moments in a game. They will move here or there. And something I noticed watching the recent European internationals was that a lot of football these days, they don't do that. They defend their patch. They do exactly as they're told. So it looks like two systems fighting each other, which is fine, but there's no overlay of individual, uh, the decision to break away, basically, and do whatever you want, and spontaneity to see if something else can happen than is already being attempted.
Yeah, well, I love that comment because watching the highlights of the Liverpool and Leeds game, what I loved about what Leeds did was they started off with this 4-1-4-1 formation, but as you said, and you nailed it on the crux, is that they were able to adapt. So they were able to go to a 3-5-2 to be able to break Liverpool's 4-3-3 structure. And so there was this passage of play that was identical to what we did with them in the Community Shield, the Arsenal-Liverpool game, where they played out from the back and they were able to break away from this zone. And I think a lot of the clubs like Wolves in particular and Leeds now coming through, these up-and-coming clubs from the Championship, they build really, really strong teams. But they have this tactical nous now where the coaches realise that they need to be really, really flexible, because if you're not against these teams and you try to match it with them and you try to play the same football, they'll absolutely roast you. But being able to break them and sit sort of further back on the counter-attack, then you can weave your way through it. Would you sort of agree with that analysis that I just put through there, Phil?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, this idea of having courage sort of means you see a lot of teams. You saw it in the first Arsenal match. Player can see the run and decides not to play the ball yet again. Why? Because his contract depends upon him playing at 10 meters left or right, keeping the ball so that something will eventually happen, maybe from the front three. But with the Leeds side, they have this sort of playmaker they stuck, Calvin Phillips, English player. He's the one that played that beautiful pass up to Jack Harrison. Great first touch. Do you remember this goal? Like it was really made in England, kind of, but with a bit of Dutch technical ability, and also the kind of arrogance to take on that Liverpool backline, touch it this way, touch it that way, and then he decided to shoot with his wrong foot, which you could see all the defenders were not anticipating that. Just something like his brain went, I'm going to do this. And I think Bielsa, we're going to see that a lot from Leeds. You see that a lot from Liverpool, but mainly from the front three, who do seem to have a license to improvise, make it up, try something new. Dare I say it, lose the ball.
Yes, and you're absolutely correct. And I think Liverpool's I think they've just made a signing today to try and strengthen that back line. I think that why this season's Premier League will be a bit closer is I feel that the lesser teams have started to work out how to penetrate, especially Man City's and Liverpool's defence, and they're working out how they can combat this. Also, some of the backliners, with Vincent Kompany retiring last year, there's more frailty within that Man City backline that we haven't seen for a number of years. And I think Virgil van Dijk from Liverpool, he's sort of lost a tiniest little bit of speed, and you can see that the quick players that can break on the side. This is just my observations over the last, since lockdown. Just because they know that they can now beat him a little bit with speed, they've got players that play on that side of the field. Let's say, it's just really interesting. Yeah, what was it? There was a really great example. It was the first game that we played against them after lockdown, and I think it was either Lacazette or Reece Nelson, a youngster. I think it was Reece Nelson. As soon as Van Dijk made that mistake, boom, just went straight past him and kicked a goal straight away, which was a big thing. Also, he made a boo-boo in the Leeds game, and I think one of their forwards went straight past him as well. So they're realising that he's not as unbeatable because he had this reputation of being absolutely unbeatable and this
Had
brick
an aura.
wall. They're starting to find out what his weaknesses are. A
You know
little,
that mistake that you mentioned. A ball came over, a sort of speculative ball, and striker Brantford, who had earlier on sort of spurned a chance to put Leeds ahead. And you're thinking first game. I mean, Leeds were basically playing on adrenaline. You're back up in the Premier League. You've worked so hard to get there. Liverpool were being professional, and they had to pull out a pretty special goal from Mohamed Salah to win that match. But Van Dijk, the ball's coming over, casually trying to outsmart everyone like he normally does.
yeah,
See, that mistake, I think, will create two things. One is Brantford got his confidence back because he was following up like a good striker. He shouldn't have got that ball, but he put it away.
Mhm.
So that could have a big knock-on effect for how the rest of his season goes. I know as a player, when you score on the first day of a season, kind of doesn't matter whatever happened in the past. Next week, you are double as hungry as you were if you missed a chance, and you don't overthink it too much. Van Dijk, I think he's a bit. I wonder if all the players aren't a bit of a victim of being datified too much by PlayStation. That was a Van Dijk pass that he made there. Van
yeah.
Dijk made FIFA pass.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, they've now won the Champions League. They've won the Premier League. You know, they had fire in their belly because City beat them, I think it was by that 1 point in the EPL the year before. And so they've done basically what they've needed to do. I mean, you've got to keep that hunger up. It's really, really difficult. And the thing is, when you win the EPL title, you become the hunted. And all the teams below you want to try and find your weaknesses. So a Liverpool fan of mine was saying that they're contemplating a new move, a new style of football, which would be a 4-2-4 formation, which
Wow.
has perks, but also means that there's a lot of space between the two, you know what I mean? So in that midfield, there's a lot of space. So a lot of teams that decide to utilize that space or have a very, very strong presence or big bodies in their backline in particular, will be able to get their quick players and pass the ball to them so they can really penetrate through that midfield. So I don't know if that's the correct solution, but I mean, all teams need to try different tactics to be able to keep their relevance and their strength. And
Did you get did you get the feeling towards the end of last season after lockdown, even before lockdown, that they'd almost become too used to their own system and given everyone else enough time to see what they're doing? They didn't exactly, roll over the line at maximum speed. And with what you're saying, they're thinking of buying Alcantara, right?
yeah,
Which, if they get Alcantara, he's a little nippier, little different sort of player to Fabinho and Henderson, perhaps. And so maybe if they get him, they can accommodate this new system. What did you call it?
4-2-4.
4-2-4. Wow, that's like a throwback to the 60s or something.
Yeah, well, that was apparently a Liverpool fan who was looking at a lot of their preseason games. It was my first friend that was on, Arnold. He was telling me that in those games they were trying out all those different formations. So it was a 4-2-4 formation. I mean, if you want to play that really successfully, I think you need some really, really big, sturdy bodies to have this bullying presence, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of space, but you've got to scare the absolute crap out of your opponents, and you just use that by that physical and that tallness, something that I think is very important in the EPL, and I keep mentioning it. I love the way that Arsenal has been able to recruit Gabriel. He's a big boy. Maitland-Niles, who's starting to play in that left wing-back, right wing-back, he's a very multifunctional player. They're big guys, they can run really, really quickly. So I think that slow defender might come this season in particular as a liability unless there's a lot of injuries, which could happen because of the schedule being so tight. So, it's going to be a fascinating season. Was there anything else that you noticed during the week or during the weekend games that you were surprised with, or was it pretty much as expected for you?
A little bit as expected. Just the excitement of, whenever the Premier League kicks off, and there's that not knowing. Some of the teams haven't had much of a pre-season, so not spending a lot of time together. Um, but you mentioned something just then about Van Dijk being a little slow. I
Mhm.
don't see that. I don't understand how he does it, but he looks like the kind of player that's just never ever going to get injured. Compare him to Company, who was a brilliant defender, but always had that slightly awkward, gangly style. Looked like he was going to try and dribble people. Van Dijk, it's like he's giving you a cup of tea as he takes the ball away from you and gently distributes it anywhere he wants. And as for big bodies in the middle of the park, something that your Gunners have now. Who was this player that juggled the ball halfway
Oh,
up the
Rob
field?
Holding, he's a big boy too.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. And he's our central. He's a CB, central or CD, central backliner. He's just it's crazy.
The last time I saw someone do that, they were definitely a Brazilian of some kind, like a Ronaldinho or well, Hazard might have done it once or twice, but you really don't see it that much, do you? And in an opening day Premier League fixture, that was okay. That was surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also shows you how important it is to win trophies. Why Arsenal, I think, has got this confidence is that they've won the FA Cup, they won the Shield. Any sort of silverware, no matter how good or how poor that silverware is, breeds a culture of confidence. And I don't
Yeah.
think Liverpool would have expected to have lost that game, if I was to be honest. Their
Mm.
supporters were pretty arrogant on a lot of social media things that I saw. But it just shows you, with Arsenal, they really know how to play at Wembley, and it just shows when we win the FA Cup, proof is in the facts. Our last four FA Cups that we've won is the last four Community Shields we've won, and I know that it's a friendly, but it's always good to play the top teams really early on. But the test for us, I think, will be when we head to Liverpool, to Anfield. Let's see if we can actually get a result. And it's good to not have the crowd there. I think for Liverpool, that's a huge advantage to them. But the surprise packet for me over the weekend was actually how poor Tottenham was. I thought that they would have given a much better showing. But I will say this, that the Rodriguez, who's in their midfield, and the way that Everton played in that game, they should have won that game 3-0. They absolutely battered them all over the
Yeah.
place. Tottenham looked like a slow team, and they would be really, really hoping that Gareth Bale is coming back into that squad with the latest rumours that I've heard. They would really be hoping that. And you were
Well,
saying that it was terrible, that game.
well, having said that, yeah, I mean, it was almost. I mean, we're talking about Mourinho, so you've got to have some respect, but it's almost like he performed a magic trick to get some of the fastest, most creative players that are fantastic. They have that fantastic link-up play to not connect almost ever in any single situation in that match. I don't know. They could put Gareth Bale there, and Mourinho would find a way to sort of keep him out of the game or something. I think Tottenham really miss Eriksen. I didn't watch them at the beginning of the year when they decided that they had enough defeats and Pochettino was released. But the way they played for those few years under him, you could always enjoy it, win or lose. But under Mourinho, wow, he's done the Mourinho on them. Like they look like Chelsea, which could just mean that they win it by boring us to death. But I don't think they're solid enough to do that. Do you?
No, they don't have the depth in the squad. What was brilliant with Chelsea in that team was the spending power that he was given, so he could have an incredible bench and just bring on fresh players and just bore the other teams to death, basically, I feel. But also they had that strike power with on the counter attack, and I don't think Tottenham. That's not their style of football. Their style of football is to be quite attractive. I think under Pochettino, he was able to get them to play a very, very free, flowing style of football that was
Well,
extremely intuitive.
let me
Um,
stop you there. Pochettino and actually Guardiola are big disciples of Bielsa. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see Leeds will be the new Tottenham this season.
Yeah, I think so too. But Leeds have absolutely nailed it by having a really good team that battered everybody in the championship and has come into the EPL season with a solid team. A solid team, and all they're doing is spending their cash to strengthen it because the core nucleus is there. Unfortunately, with Tottenham, they had this fantastic academy and it brought in phenomenal footballers. But in that time, and I've said it on 100 different podcasts and hundreds of different conversations, when you have a team like that, you need to win something. I know that it's important to finish in the top four, and Champions League for them was a huge incentive because they never got to play it very much. But fourth place is not a trophy. As an Arsenal fan, I know this very, 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 very well. And there's some years where you're just not going to finish in it, and that's happened to us for the last 3 or 4 years. Why have we kept relevant? Because we've won trophies. Doesn't mean that we like the way that the club is run, but there's a big club mentality to win something even when you're in your banter era. This was supposed to be Tottenham's golden child, and they absolutely butchered it by not winning anything. And of course, I feel they're really suffering because of that.
I think you're right in this way of putting it. Then they're the new Leeds, the Leeds from the early thousands that had Kuehl and Viduka, and got to the semi-final of the Champions League, played unbelievable football no one expected them to get. And then I think the owners or whoever's in charge of the purse strings had that decision to make, and at that point they were sort of all their chips in, and completely stuffed themselves. With Leeds, I mean, I don't know if they're exactly like that. Athletically, they don't look like, Bielsa apparently runs them like crazy in training sessions, but just the kind of, of the elite footballers that Liverpool had, that first 2 or 3 steps where they can just go so quickly and decide so quickly. I didn't really see that with Leeds. Did you?
No, they're a working class team, but that's not a bad thing because if they've got that attitude of working really hard, all they need to do, because they're actually a big club. They've got a lot of money that they can spend. They've got a lot of supporters. Their stadium was the biggest stadium that was outside of the EPL in terms of capacity and fans. They have a huge fan base, so there's always money pumped into it. That's all they need to do is, like, if they get decent results, people will go, oh, this is a great project to come into. We want to join Leeds. It's a crucial signing, especially, I'll just compare it to Arsenal. It's just so easy because we've been going terribly. But getting Aubameyang to sign that deal, it's a marquee statement because it's the first time in 16, 17 years where we've been able to retain our best player who was our captain and he stayed on a 3-year contract. Big thing, because then other players come in and they go, yeah, I'm buying into this. Their best player's finally staying with them. Obviously, something's going right. So it plays a huge, huge factor in determining a lot of things. But, having said that, it's going to be interesting to see what happens this weekend. In terms of the games this weekend, because I've got it here on my iPad at the moment, we're going to see 2 teams that haven't played yet, and I want your thoughts on this. The Wolves versus Man City game, it's at Wolves Stadium. How do you see that game going? Because I don't see Manchester City really doing a huge amount of deals. They got Ake or something like that in their team, and he seems like a pretty decent player. But for their standards of spending, this has been very low. What are your thoughts on this game in particular?
Oh man, well, it's safe to say Man City will wrap it up. I think Guardiola, you never really need to question whether he's motivated or not. Aguero, he's kind of getting a bit long in the tooth, isn't he? Maybe he'll get smarter. He's always been very smart, but maybe he'll learn to move less, or he'll be given the license to move less. But I think with Raheem Sterling, he's really hit his straps the last couple of seasons from under Guardiola. He looks like a kind of a different player. And maybe he's just grown up into that role as well. He's got permission to try stuff. Wolves, on the other hand, Adama Traore, You never know what that guy's going to do. Yeah, and they've got that incredible finisher. I can't believe a big club. There must be some technical reason why no one came in for Jimenez, right? Did you see that finish last weekend? He passed into the top left corner from kind of the top. It was just, it looked easy. It had that sort of Cantona arrogance about it. Like, I know what I'm going to do now, and it doesn't matter what the rest of you do. Bang. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they have an incredible coach.
Yeah.
But I think Man City will shade it, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. But I'll be interested because Wolves have spent quite a fair bit with their transfers as well, and I'd love to see how they gel as a team. They seem to play this fantastic, as I said, counter-attacking football against the top six, and they've been very, very successful because their forwards are just on point. They score whenever they get the ball. They don't get that many opportunities against the top six, but they absolutely nailed it. And Nuno,
Clinical.
their coach, he's absolutely superb. But I think Man City has got that one. And then the next game that I'm really intrigued for you, because I know that deep down you've had an affiliation with this club, but you find their football at the moment quite boring, is Manchester United versus Crystal Palace at Old Trafford, I think. So what do you think with that game?
Sorry, but yeah, it has to be Man United. I mean, they've been on an upward trajectory, even though their football I haven't really enjoyed that much. But I think they're going to come out strong. And I mean, Crystal Palace, Zaha, he might pull something out of the bag. Sometimes on a big stage, I guess players like that, they really get motivated. They have a desire to prove something, to show in front of on the big stage, and that can go against them as well. He might try too hard, or he might do the thing. Who knows? But yeah, Man United, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think the game of the round, I'm going to say the Arsenal versus West Ham game at the Emirates. Arsenal should win that quite comfortably. I think it should be an easy 2-0, 3-0. But knowing our defence, it could be 5-2. So we'll see if that game that they played against Fulham, they bring that sort of defence to the West Ham game. So
You were extremely critical of some of the, what was it, the slowness of the midfield you were lamenting the other day.
Oh, it's poor. I mean, for a big club, we need to have a midfield that's quick. And if you don't have that, I think it's a liability to the defence because if you can't chase the ball and all these midfielders of other teams are going to go through to your defence, it puts unnecessary pressure on that back three or back four. And then you're requiring your keeper to do so much work. And we've got a quality keeper like Leno. I don't want him to get burnt out in 3 seasons because he's had to save our bacon for the last 2 seasons because the people in front of him aren't doing our job. I think, with the Arsenal midfield, Ceballos is great, but he's not particularly quick, but he's got excellent skill. I think he's a quality player. Xhaka is just like a Rolls Royce, just doesn't get out of first gear. However, you add one more midfielder to that who's got a bit of pace and can do things. It means that Xhaka can utilise what he needs to do, his left foot. He's a big kick, and that's what you want to see. So if you've got slow midfielders, get a quick midfield player next to them so that they can help them out and take away the players so that they've got a bit of space to do what they're really good at. And so...
Yeah, Matty, you talk about quick, but, let me say these names to you. Riziki,
yeah.
Flet, Bergkamp was the midfielder, but, I mean, we're talking about creativity. Henri, I mean, you always say, he was a great finisher, but really he had creativity. When I watch that Arsenal midfield, it's just like they're bakers. Their job is just to sit there and build a fence and play the ball up to the forwards. I didn't see anything that that I'd play on PlayStation for.
No, absolutely. So that's why we need somebody like a Thomas Partey from Atletico Madrid. He's got a bit of X factor. We need Hossam Orr from Lyon. He again is another very creative player that could fill in Ozil's thing. But then it's great to have those workhorses in the midfield because I remember all my favourite Manchester United teams. And you had people like Scholes. He wasn't quick. He was just a workhorse, but he had a lethal boot. And that's what you need in English football. You need workhorses and you need really sensational, creative players. But with Arsenal, the creativity is in that forward line. So if you can build this sort of brick wall even in the midfield, so the ball just goes to those creative players in the forward, in the forward third with Willian or Pepe or Lacazette or Aubameyang, world's your oyster because they can create everything. It doesn't matter where you counter attack from. It doesn't matter where you set up your wall. I mean, if we have two brick walls in the midfield and the back line, I don't care because it means then the ball's not going to get through as much. And if it does, it means Leno can actually save the ball. The defenders can just defend it and kick it out. It makes for a pretty tactically sound way that Arsenal want to play, which I think in the future will want to be a 4-3-3, not a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3 formation. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I'm seeing at the moment, what they're trying to do. But we must get on to the game of the game of the round. Chelsea versus Liverpool at Stamford Bridge. This is the big. These two teams were in my top three. How do you see this game playing out? Because I thought Chelsea, even though they conceded a goal, they were still pretty powerful in that game. And Liverpool was a great game. I wouldn't say they were technically defensively sound, though. So it could be a very interesting game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting one. I mean, I've seen Lampard play live. When I was in Malaysia, Chelsea came over to play. And they played the Malaysian national team. So I go for Frank. I like his style very much. I like the fact that he's talking back to all of these managers, and he started a bit of a war of words with Klopp, hasn't he? He's a man's man. You got to love Klopp, and I couldn't be happier for a manager to win stuff than I am for him. Really, I think he's excellent. So who's going to shade it? Well, if Chelsea can pull it together, I don't know. Is Pulisic injured or is he back playing? He's a very creative player.
I'm not sure, actually. I'll find that out and put it on my next podcast. That's something I'll remember to do.
I don't know whether they should. They didn't play Giroud on the weekend exactly. I never understand why teams don't play him more often. He, as someone who can hold up the ball and sort of attack Van Dijk a bit with his size. But I think Liverpool will shade it because the first game they were just getting into gear, and if they continue on that trajectory, then yeah, they'll take it.
I think for me, it's the front three that's the big difference between the two teams. And the reason why I say that is I think Alisson is a really top goalkeeper, but I don't think Kepa is. And they can have the best defence in the world, but you can't contain those three at the front of Liverpool, even with a back four or five. So you're going to have to rely on your keeper. And so I think Kepa is not up to it, and I think that will be the reason why they will lose this game, because there will be goals. I don't think you can stop that strike.
I don't think that's a very good analysis. I agree with that. Also, Chelsea is still building. Liverpool is built. In fact, they're so well built. Their starting 11 is, you can sort of guess it every week, really, almost. Whereas with Chelsea, I think he's still going to tinker a bit, isn't he? Yeah.
But I like what Lampard's doing. It reminds me of the old Manchester United and Arsenal rivalries where Wenger and, of course, Sir Alex Ferguson always had their war words. And that then came into those clashes. And, of course, for 10 years, those clashes were the pinnacle of the EPL because there was so much fire in the belly. I mean, you have players like Keane and Vieira just wanting to kill each other in the tunnel. It just sets a tune, and both of them are captains. So there's fire in the belly. I mean, you start doing this with big teams and big rivalries, the players will get really pepped up and it could end up being one of the big rivalries for the next 10 years. So I'm very intrigued. And Frankie's done something finally by doing this. He's making Chelsea look like a big club. Do you know what I mean? Because he's firing with that belly, whereas I've always found Chelsea sort of a bit mouthy with not a huge amount of bite. They've been able to win things, but even when you win things, you don't hear a yelp from them. Whereas if you have the big three, whenever United wins things, everybody goes crazy. Whenever Liverpool wins things, everybody goes crazy. God forbid when Arsenal win FA Cups, it's like we've won Champions League on crack. It's just insane. You hear it. It's all over the place. That's how big clubs act, and it's nice to see Lampard actually have a bit of fire in his belly and put it up to one of the big three. So good on him. I agree. I think it's going to be a very intriguing battle. But I think this battle will really showcase what the top three are about. And if any of these coaches like Arteta, Nuno, Solskjaer are watching this game, they might be able to find some things with their tactics to try and play against these guys, because it'll be a game where a lot of things will be shown because of the quality of football that will probably be played. But it could give an insight as to maybe how you have to go about trying to play these big boys, and maybe you need to sit back a bit on that sort of counter-attack and prove what potentially Arteta's done against Liverpool twice. So we'll see. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting round. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe it's only round 2, So thanks, Phil, for being on board here with me. That was a lot of fun. I reckon we'll try and get a watch-along sometime when you and myself are watching the soccer, or I'd like to call footy, on the TV, and we'll do a session like this, and we'll scream and howl. We can hear my negative comments the whole time about what are you doing, especially when it's with Arsenal. You said that's sometimes a bit of an Australian trait to get a bit negative with things.
A bit negative.
It's just when you see it week in, week out, when you're following a team, as you're well aware, because you follow Barca as well. You see what
you get frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, why aren't you doing something about that? And you want your teams to transfer. That's why the transfer market's so important, because they're the spots where you want the team to strengthen, because it's their weakness and it's their Achilles heel. So I'm fortunate and glad that Arsenal have got somebody that's big in the back line. You're following Leeds a bit. They've done very well in the transfer market. They were able to match Liverpool in that first game. Great job. Wolves have done excellent transferring. Chelsea absolutely smashed it, but of course they had the pan and they had all of Eden Hazard's money that they could use, so they haven't had to spend too much because that's all been in the kitty as well. It's just going to be fascinating to see what happens.
I definitely say that the club that's strengthened their squad in the most impressive way was Chelsea. We've said that before, when Abramovich came in. And actually never gets mentioned these days, but back in the day when Arsenal bought half the French national team, or, the two best players of, and then half the Dutch national team in. And, so in a way, Chelsea's got that power to do that. And Frank's job is just to see if they can gel, see if they can communicate, and then they'll start ripping it up. But I think not for a few weeks just yet. I don't see them running away with anything. Whereas your Man City, you know what they're like when they come out of the blocks. If De Bruyne's had a good holiday, this bloke can put a football wherever he wants on the park. And with that pace up front, I think it'll be between Liverpool and Man City again, to be honest, the title race this year.
Me too, but I think there's a stigma always with Man City that they're a rich club. The PSG has the same thing. They can win their leagues, but they don't perform in Europe like they should. And that's why I've said to you numerous times why I've been so impressed with Liverpool. They know how to play Champions League. They've won the EPL. And it does mentally play in the minds of the players. So this year, I know Man City's going to want blood after losing in that Champions League. It was a quarter-final that they lost in. They lost 3 or 4 times in there. They'll want blood in that competition. You can only focus you can only focus your eggs on so many baskets before you start stretching yourself thin, even with a great squad like Man City. So what are they going to focus on? They want to win a Champions League because of their money. Does that mean sometimes they might take the boil off the EPL? It's going to be fascinating. And with all of these games compressed like this together, the depth of the squad is going to be extremely important. Even if you've got it, if they're half injured, you still have no depth. So
that reminds me of that recalls something to me. You talked about depth of the squad, how far each club goes in each competition. So don't know if you noticed this, but Leeds after that really good showing. I mean, the coach gave Klopp what can only be described as a terrible hug. When he gives his interviews, his eyes are down the whole time. Bielsa, he just doesn't want to know. He's so inside, and he hugged Klopp, and just yeah, well done. Not dismissive like I hate your guts, but one of those ones. He stormed off with his head to the ground, and then he picked a whole different 11 for the Carabao Cup game, which they ended up losing.
Yeah.
But I think to me that signals his intention that actually he'd be delighted they knocked out of that cup, because this gives his team time to focus. Their adrenals would have been off the chart for that first game. And what he doesn't want to happen is for them to just have to keep burning. So probably gave them a rest. And now they can just focus on remaining in the Premier League.
Yeah. Yeah, but whereas, our Carabao Cup tie, or the League Cup with Arsenal, is with Leicester. So that's going to be a very, very full-on match. And I think the game's at Leicester. And, our aims, I think, are a bit different. I think Arsenal will be trying to win as many trophies as they can. So they bring this culture of winning consistently in the game. So I feel that they're going to want to go very far in the Carabao Cup. They'll want to go really far into the FA Cup. And they'll want to go really far into Europa League. So by doing those three cups, to get to the semi-finals, let's say, so Europa League games, Carabao Cup games, and FA Cup, they'll want to make all the semi-finals, at least of them. That's already 15 to 16 games, or 17 games altogether.
Extra.
That consistency, if they win all those games, then they can sort of bring to the EPL, and in a couple of years' time, bring that sort of 20, 24 games, 25 games when they get onto these runs and win them and draw, to become more competitive over a 38-game season. So for us, I think it's about winning trophies, but learning how to play consistently and winning all of those games. So, there's going to be a whole lot of different tactics. And Arteta, being a Man City former assistant manager, will know that Carabao Cup very, very well. And he'll want to see Arsenal win it, because we've lost twice in a row in that final with the Carabao Cup. So, yeah, it's very interesting that you bring that point, because each team has a different thing. And for Leeds, perfect that they get knocked out because they can focus on the Premier League. Great observation. Anyways, we better head off, but we will definitely have another session with Phil and myself, because he has the brain. I love picking it, and we could speak for 4 or 5 hours, but then just think about how long it'll take to upload the videos. So, a breath of fresh air. We'll be back with many episodes next week, and we look forward to doing a watch-along very, very soon with you in the near future. I'm Matthew. This is Phil, both co-founders of Breath of Fresh Footy, and you're watching all of the latest and most up-to-date analysis of the EPL thus far. Thank you very much, and we bid you farewell.